You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Monday the 6th of February. Welsh Government launches a non-smoking ban in cars. Prime Minister is being pressured to cut the enormous amount of aid to India. A Dutch Muslim politician has called for a ban on dogs in The Hague, the third largest city in the Netherlands. Syrian forces bombard Homs. Putin promises Russians a larger say in politics. Aung San Suu Kyi gains approval to run in Burma's parliamentary elections. And thought for the day. UK news. The Welsh Government has launched a campaign to ban smoking in cars which are carrying children, it's been announced. This could lead to a total ban on smoking in vehicles in the future. It is maintained by some reports that smoke in a confined space affects young children in the long-term health lottery, and if you consider that some children are in their parents' cars more than once a day, this is open to debate. David Cameron was under pressure last night to cut the £1 billion worth of aid Britain gives to India after the country said it no longer wanted the money. In fact, the exact words from India's Finance Minister Pranab Mukherjee were, "We do not require aid. It is a peanut in our total development spending." Currently India receives £280 million a year from hard-pressed British taxpayers, all of which they do not need. A party spokesperson has commented, "Do not reduce it but cut it out completely. This amount of money could help reduce our deficit and help our sick and elderly in the UK." The Telegraph further reports that Indian ministers tried to terminate British aid to their country last year, but the British begged them to keep taking the money. On Medica reports government bailout for 7 NHS trusts hit by PFI debt. 7 National Health Hospital trusts struggling to repay PFI debts are set to be bailed out by the government to the tune of up to £1.5 million each, the Department of Health has announced. Euronews. A Dutch Muslim politician has called for a ban on dogs in The Hague, the third largest city in the Netherlands. Islamic legal tradition holds that dogs are unclean animals, and obviously it is a strong attempt to reculturise the West to fit into the Muslim idea of a Sharia indoctrinated Europe. The Dutch public has greeted this news with a mixture of amusement and outrage, but it follows dozens of other Muslim vs dog related incidents in Europe. This medieval would-be law was put forward by Hasan Küçük, a Turkish-Dutch representative on the Hague City Council for the Islam Democrats, who have vehemently opposed a proposal by the party for the animals to make the city more dog-friendly. According to a report in the Amsterdam-based newspaper De Telegraaf, Küçük counter-argued that keeping dogs as pets is tantamount to animal abuse, and he then called for the possession of dogs in The Hague to be criminalised. Paul de Linden, who represents the Dutch Freedom Party, PVV, on the Hague City Council, responded to Küçük by saying, and I quote, "In this country pet ownership is legal. Whoever disagrees with this should move to another country." Political commentators believe Küçük's declarations are a provocation made deliberately to ignite the Muslim population in The Hague. There, Muslims make up more than 12% of the city's population of 500,000 and all view dogs as ritually unclean animals, with the result that Küçük's call for a ban on them is a sure vote-getter. Unfortunately, throughout Europe now, with the ever-growing Islamic threat of overpopulation, there has been an increasing amount of attacks and bans on dogs, even extending to guide dogs for the blind and poisonings in Spain. Even in the UK there have been cases of people being turned off public transport because their animals offended a Muslim passenger. This is a pre-runner to a total reculturalisation of Europe and should be resisted and monitored very carefully. World News. Syrian forces bombard Homs. Reuters reports Syrian forces kill 50 people in their continued bombardment of Homs. They are targeting districts that are home to opponents of President Bashar al-Assad's rule. Damascus denies firing on Homs and blames the death on armed terrorists. Putin promises Russians a larger say in politics. Prime Minister Putin, running for a third term as Russian president, stressed the need to renew the mechanism of our democracy, turning around government institutions so that they listen to the people and give greater freedom of governance to regional and municipal officials. Aung San Suu Kyi gains approval to run in Burma's parliamentary elections. Burma's election commission has approved Aung San Suu Kyi's eligibility to run in the coming parliamentary by-elections. After almost 50 years of military rule, Burma is now relaxing its stranglehold on the opposition. Even if the opposition were to win all 48 seats being contested, they will be heavily outclassed in the 440-seat parliament, which is dominated by military appointees and those favoured by the former junta. Thought for the day. Well, it had to come, didn't it? I know we live in a soft-touch country, but I always thought of British justice as a veritable bastion in an ever-growing society of the good suffer and the bad celebrate. But this has taken the biscuit. The hanging judges and the eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth radicals must be turning in their graves, with the latest bleating from what is a grave threat to Britain and the British. This Muslim cleric, who should be ashamed of using the word cleric, or indeed God, is still in this country. Why? Because his lawyers have said that he should be released regardless of the risk he poses to UK security. Abu Qatada, who is being held in a high security conditions, no doubt with prayer mats, the Koran and just about everything else he needs, including a view to Mecca, wants to be released on bail as he fights deportation to Jordan. But lawyers for the Home Secretary Theresa May are battling to keep him behind bars, while British diplomats continue to seek, and wait for it, assurances from the Jordanian authorities that evidence gained through torture would not be used against him. What is it with these people? Let Jordan have him, torture him, whatever. Why do we in a Western nation actually care what happens in the Middle East as far as democracy goes? Here we are, having spent a small fortune on this morally bereft person, for want of a different and unprintable word, in fact far more than is spent on our elderly and sick people, trying to get him off a charge which he should answer for. Where did the term human rights mean that if you did something bad you got away with it, and were in fact helped by people in power to do so? If this man had been white and Christian, he would have been in front of the War Crimes Tribunal in The Hague years ago, as would many of his accomplices. Deport him and his entire family, who are subbing off the taxpayers anyway. He has umpteen wives, and God only knows how many miniature Abus he has managed to sire on his unfortunate spouses, but they will be as legion, for they are many. Deport, deport and deport, say I. We have a nanny state attitude in this country towards the peoples of non-democratic policy countries, but then in the next breath we are enabling these people to bring in laws and culture that they are leaving in their own countries because they are harsh. Are we really that stupid in the West? Or is this a huge case of social and cultural engineering that might help us when the Chinese eventually move into Europe? I hope not, because the Chinese have no time at all for anyone else's culture, let alone Islam, so we're barking up the wrong tree there. I heard a person say quite rightly that unless the Arabs had oil they would be in the Dark Ages now, and they really haven't contributed anything to the world but trouble and strife. In fact, poor old Moses is having a hard time with his followers now, because he turned the wrong way coming out of Egypt and ended up with milk and honey but no oil. It boils down to keeping our noses out of other countries' business. If the president of Syria wants to demolish protesters, good on him. We should let this Abu go and in fact chuck him and his family out. There, simples, wasn't it? And finally, Big Brother is alive, well and growing. TechEyeNet reports London's Camden Council threatens its constituents but with shouting CCTV. The camera, spotted by London blog Big Smoke, was found in a residential estate of the borough in a communal garden. When approached, it blasts out an American voice demanding residents stop, as it is a restricted area. It tells residents that their photograph is being taken and will be sent for processing if they don't leave the area now. Camden Council spokespeople told Tech Eye that they're trying to find out the details and will get back to us. Don't hold your breath on that one, my friends. You have been listening to The World at 8. I am Lynn Mozart and I wish you all a very good night. In the Netherlands, Syrian forces bombard Homs. Putin promises Russians a larger say in politics. Aung San Suu Kyi gains approval to run in Burma's parliamentary elections. And thought for the day.
The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Monday the 6th of February. Welsh Government law. UK News. The Welsh Government has launched a campaign to ban smoking in cars which are carrying children, it's been announced. This could lead to a total ban on smoking in vehicles in the launches a non-smoking ban in cars. Prime Minister is being pressured to cut the enormous amount of aid to India. A Dutch Muslim politician has called for a ban on dogs in The Hague, the third largest city in...
You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart.